All right, guys, we're going to go through the review questions for the quarterfinal really quick. I'm not going to spend too much time because you have seen all of these problems at least twice already, and we don't want to disrupt Abby taking her test more than we have to. So number one, use the symmetric property of congruence to complete the statement. Remember, symmetric property says that if LS is congruent to VU, then VU is congruent to LS. That one's pretty simple. You will want to also remember the transitive property, which says that if A is congruent to B and B is congruent to C, then A is congruent to C. And you'll also want to remember the other one is the symmetric property that says if A is congruent to B, then B is congruent to A. So you want to remember both of those. Oh, sorry, we have that one already. The third one is the reflexive. That's the third one that you need, which says that A is congruent to A. Or if it's talking about sides of a triangle, it might say something like AB is congruent to BA. Same line, just flipped. Remember, reflective like reflecting in a mirror. Number two, in the figure below, it gives you a bunch of angles. It tells you angle 4 is 90 degrees. It tells you angle 5 is 61. And angle 6 is 29 degrees, and it wants you to find measures 1, 2, and 3. So this just uses vertical angles. 3 and 6 are vertical, so 3 is also 29 degrees. 2 and 5 are vertical, so 2 is also 61 degrees. And 4 and 1 are vertical angles, which means they're the same. So 1 is 90 degrees. Number 3, the distinct lines A, B, and C and D are in the same plane. Tell how A and D relate. This one, the easiest way to work through this one is to draw the picture as it describes it. So A is perpendicular. Remember, this symbol means perpendicular. A is perpendicular to B. So if this is my A, then that means that B goes this way. They make a 90-degree angle. Then it tells you that B and C are parallel. So if this is B, that means C goes this way because it's parallel to B. And C and D are perpendicular. So if here's my C, that means D also goes straight up and down. And it wants to know, if this is my picture, how are A and D relating? And looking at the picture, A and D are parallel. And then you just have to read to find which one is true. So A says A is parallel to D because A is parallel to C. Well, looking at the picture, A and C are not parallel. So it's not A. A is perpendicular to D. We already know that one's not true. A is parallel to D because A is perpendicular to C. So A and C are perpendicular. That's true. And C is perpendicular to D, which is true. So that would be your answer, C. All right, number 4. Determine whether the pair of triangles is congruent. Remember, to be congruent, all the sides have to be equal and the angles have to be equal. In this case, we've got 7 and 8, 4 and 3, 5 and 7, which clearly are not the same. So this one pretty obviously is not congruent. Number 5, complete the 2-column proof. It gives you this picture that kind of goes along with the given. It says that HO is congruent to PE. So this side here is congruent to PE. HE is congruent to PO, and then it wants you to fill in the proof. So statement 1, HO is congruent to PE. That's given. So down here you would select given. It's going to have you do these one at a time. Step 2, HE is congruent to PO. That's also given. So you'll select given. Step 3 wants you to use the reflexive property, which we just talked about. So looking at these options for 3, 0 is the midpoint. That has nothing to do with reflection. OEP and OEH, those are angles. That has nothing to do with reflection. HO is congruent to HE. So that's saying that HO and HE are congruent, which for 1, they're not. For 2, HO and HE aren't the same. So that leaves OE is congruent to EO, which is what we want. OE is congruent to EO because they're the same line. That's the reflexive property. Number 4, if these lines right here are the same, then we know that the two triangles are congruent because of side, side, side. We have three sides that are all the same. So that side, side, side postulate tells us it's true. Number 5, if the angles are congruent, or if the triangles are congruent, then that means that angle H is congruent to angle P because corresponding parts of triangles are congruent. The one on the test is probably going to look pretty similar. It may not be the exact same picture. It may not be the exact same proof, but it's going to use the same ideas. So number 6, use triangle ABC to solve KQ. So looking at the picture, we're going from the vertex to the midpoint. We know these are midpoints because these lines tell us that they're the same length, which makes this the midpoint. And if you remember something about these lines, they're called the medians. And there's a simple, well, the math it wants you to use is pretty simple. Remember that from the vertex to the intersection, that length right here is twice as far as the rest of that line. So this piece is double the short piece. So if I know that the long piece from B, if I know that from B to K right here is 39, then I know that this short piece is half of 39. So I just have to do 39 divided by 2. I think it's going to want your answer as a decimal. So in this case, I'm going to put 19.5. All right, 7. Find the value of x in the proportion. You can cross multiply 4 times 11, which is 44, and then divide by 2 and get 22. That's one way to solve it. The other one is just looking at the proportion. To go from 2 to 4, I have to double my number. So to go from 11 to x, I also have to double 11, which is just 22. Either way, you get the same answer. That should be a no-brainer. Number 8, list the pair of congruent angles and fill in the extended proportion. So looking at this picture, it says that these two triangles are similar. ABC is similar to HIJ. So which angles are congruent? Angle A is in the same place as angle H. Angle B is in the same place as angle I. And angle C is in the same place as J. Okay? So that means that A and H are the same, I and B, and C and J are congruent. Then it wants you to write the proportions. So from H to I, which is this line here, that's the same as A to B. So that's what I'm going to put on top. I'm going to remember to capitalize the letters too. H to J, this one on the bottom, is the same as A to C. And from I to J is the same as from B to C. So just like up here with our angles, we just need to make sure the H's line up with the A's and the B's line up with the I's, and C and J's line up, and you'll have that one done. Number 9, what's the value of x in the simplest radical form? This one, I have two sides of a right triangle, and I want to find my hypotenuse. So we're going to use the a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So in this case, 16 squared plus 12 squared equals c squared. 16 squared is 256 plus 144 equals c squared. So 400 equals c squared. 400 is not my answer because it equals c squared. So I have to square root both sides. And the square root of 400 is 20. So x, this side here, is going to be length 20. Number 10, an escalator lifts people to the second floor of a building. So it gives you a story problem, it draws the picture for you, which is kind of nice. The escalator goes up at 30 degrees to the nearest foot. So it wants us to round to the nearest foot. How far does a person travel from the bottom to the top? So it wants this distance of the triangle right here. So if I'm using angle 30, the 21 is my opposite. The side that I'm looking for, this escalator side, is my hypotenuse, and this unknown side down here is adjacent. So I want to know the hypotenuse. I already know the opposite. So I'm looking for, in my SOHCAHTOA, I'm looking for what uses opposite and hypotenuse, which is going to be sine. So the sine of my angle, 30 degrees, equals the opposite side, 21. divided by the hypotenuse, which we don't know. That's our x. So times both sides by x to get it off the bottom. So x times the sine of 30 equals 21. And then to get rid of multiplying by the sine of 30, I'm going to divide by the sine of 30. So in my calculator, x equals 21 divided by sine 30. And you're going to go ahead and plug that in just like it looks right there on the screen. Give me just a sec. This will pull up. 21 divided by sine 30. Be careful. A lot of times here you forget that you can't just divide by 30 to make the sine go away. You have to divide by the whole thing because I want to move all of sine 30 to the other side. So we are doing, now I forgot the numbers, 21 divided by the sine of 30, which equals 42. So my hypotenuse, this length right here, would be 42 feet. And obviously 42 is an exact number, so I don't need to worry about rounding that one. Okay, what's the angle of elevation of the sun when a 46-foot mast casts a 13-foot shadow? Again, it gives you a story problem, and it draws the picture for you. So if you notice, here's my triangle right here, and it gives me two of the sides. It tells me that this side is 46, this one is 13, and it wants me to find the angle right here in the picture. So using that angle, 46 is my opposite side, 13 is adjacent because it's next to it. This one's my hypotenuse, which I don't really care about. So I'm looking for what uses opposite and adjacent. So if I have my SOHCAHTOA, which will still be up on the board at the back, opposite and adjacent is used by tangent. So the tangent of my angle that I don't know is equal to the opposite, 46, divided by the adjacent, 13. And then remember, just to get rid of tangent, because I want the angle by itself, I do the inverse tangent of both sides. So my angle is going to equal the inverse tangent of 46 divided by 13. So in your calculator, remember second inverse tangent, 46 over 13. Gives me 74.219. But if I look at my answer, it wants it simplified to the nearest degree. So 74.2 is just going to round to 74 degrees. All right, number 12, given the following statement, determine which point the statement applies to. So what is equidistance from the vertexes of a triangle? And it wants you to choose either the in-center, the circumcenter, neither, or both. Well, if you remember, the in-center is the center of the circle that is inside the triangle. And so this circle, or this point, the center of it is the equal distance from the medians or from the sides of my triangle, not the vertexes. So I know it's not the in-center. So I know it's not both. But the circumcenter is the center of the circle that goes through these 3 points, which means those 3 points are the radius of the circle. So I'm going to choose circumcenter because it's the equal distance to the vertex. 13, a picture of a family crest is 5.4 inches wide. They want to reduce a copy for their newsletter. The copy must fit in a space 1.6. So this is one that we're going to use. It wants us to find the scale factor to go from 5.4 to 1.6. So scale factor, remember, is the new divided by the old. And I want my new image to be 1.6. My old image is 5.4. And it wants me to round to do to 2 decimal places. So we're going to do 1.6 on top divided by 5.4. Not 5.1, 1.6 divided by 5.4. So 0.2962. 0.2962. And it wants me to round to do 2 decimal places. So I'm going to round that 9. I look to the right, it's a 6, which means the 9 rounds up to a 0, which rounds this to 0.30. So my answer is going to be 0.3. Even though it wants 2 decimal places, that second one rounded us up. All right, number 14, find the value of each variable. this one should be pretty quick for you, because if this is 45 degrees and this angle is 45 degrees, that means this side and this side are the same. So x is 11. And because this is my special 45, 45, 90 triangle, I know that y is equal to my short side 11 multiplied by the square root of 2. And that's all it wants for my answer. It says to use the radicals, so it doesn't want a decimal. It wants 11 root 2 as your final answer. And on 15, we're using our other special triangle, the 30, 60, 90. And it gives me, this is my long side. This one will be my short. This is my hypotenuse. So to go from my long side to my short side, remember that the long side is equal to my short side times the square root of 3. So if my long side is 22 square root 3, and that is equal to my short side times the square root of 3, this square root of 3 cancels out on both sides, which means all that's left over is 22 for my y. So y is 22. And remember that the hypotenuse of a 30, 60, 90 triangle, the hypotenuse is just 2 times my short side, which is just 2 times 22, which is just 44. So to figure out y, you just have to drop the square root 3. And to figure out x, you just have to double whatever your short side, your y was. So that, again, that one you've done 3 or 4 times now. You should have that one down pretty good. And 16, solve the right triangle. So it wants us first to find angle N, which is this angle right here. Well, I know that this is 90 and this is 53, and the angles of a triangle add up to 180. So that means these two have to add up to 90. So this angle right here has to be 37 degrees. So N is 37 degrees, not too much math involved with that one. And now it wants me to find first length N. So I'm going to ignore this 37 and I'm going to use this angle right here because it gave it to me and I know that it's true. So using this angle, 8.8 is my opposite and N is my adjacent side because P is the hypotenuse. So I want to use adjacent and opposite. So in my SOHCAHTOA, adjacent and opposite is tangent. So the tangent of my angle, 53, is equal to the opposite, 8.8, divided by the adjacent, which is N. That's what I'm looking for. So to figure out N, I just multiply both sides by N. So it's not on the bottom. So N times the tangent of 53 equals 8.8. And I want to get N by itself. So I have to divide by tangent 53 on both sides. So N equals 8.8 divided by the tangent of 53. So on my calculator, 8.8 divided by tangent of 53. And I get 6.631. 6.631. But it wants me to round to 1 decimal place right here. So the 3 makes me round down. So N is going to be 6.6. Now I need to find the hypotenuse. I'm not going to use this number because it didn't give it to me. I'm going to still use my 53 angle. Now I have the opposite and I'm looking for the hypotenuse. So to use opposite and hypotenuse, now I want to use sine. So the sine of my angle 53 is equal to the opposite side, 8.8, divided by the hypotenuse, which again, I don't know what that is. That's what I'm trying to solve for. So times both sides by, well, I guess the hypotenuse is labeled P. So times both sides by P to get it off the bottom. So P multiplied by the sine of 53 equals 8.8. And to get rid of timesing by sine 53, we just divide by the sine of 53. So P equals 8.8 divided by sine of 53. And we'll plug that in. 8.8 divided by the sine of 53 degrees gives me 11.018. And it wants me to round to 1 decimal. So the 0 rounds down because that's a 1. So my answer is just going to be, my hypotenuse is 11. Okay. And that's it. That's it for the test. This last one's probably the only one that should give you some trouble. As long as you practice these, you should be fine on the final. And remember, the final test can replace one of your other test scores if you do well on it. So this can theoretically count as 2 tests. If you need to go back and watch part of the video again, please do so. If it's not enough to help you understand the problem, just come and see me before we take the test on Friday. So good luck.